Yeah, Good morning, everybody. It is 9 o'clock or 8:59, or it's now 9 o'clock. Good morning. Welcome to the Tillamook County Housing Commission meeting on Thursday, April 3rd. We're actually already in April. Can we believe it? So I'm going to go ahead and start with introductions. And I'm going to start over here with Parker first.
Hey, my name is Parker Sammons and I am the Tillamook County Housing Coordinator.
Michelle Yang, large employer, and I have laryngitis as a bonus today since I'm presenting.
Chris Wilkes, member at large. Dave Bennett, South County Representative.
Carrie Fleischer, Chair of the Commission and Member at Large.
Mark Kessler, North County Representative.
Kristen Copdam, member at large.
Nan Devlin, Tillamook Coast Visitors Association. I think I represent major employer position.
Great.
Sarah Absher, Community Development Director.
Didn't mean to cut you off, Sarah.
Oh.
Thank you for coming. Online, we have Briar.
Briar Smith, member at large.
Gail.
Gail Uzell, member at large. I live in South County.
And a wonderful Commissioner Representative, Erin.
Good morning, Commissioner Scar, liaison to this group.
Great. And is there any member of the public that would like to introduce themselves that are online? I see Lisa there. Okay, continuing on, we have Megan Carpenter who just popped on.
Good morning, Megan Carpenter, City of Tillamook Representative.
And Dave Madison just popped in as well.
Good morning.
Good morning. And then it looks like we have Doug Chappelle.
It's Will Chappell from the Headlight Herald.
Thanks. All right, I think that covers everybody. So I'm going to hand it over to Mark. Yes, sir.
Right, the mission minute, which is time to bring us up to date on anything that's been happening of relevance to housing. Anyone have anything good or bad? Good.
All right, is there any members of the public? It looks like we don't have anybody in the room. Is there anybody online that would like to make public comment? All right, well, we're gonna move right into Sarah Absher's middle housing presentation. So I'm gonna turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you. Go ahead and pull this up. Parker, I'm gonna go ahead and do full screen, so I'm not gonna be able to see anybody online. So I'd say if anybody has any questions or comments, please feel free to add, and that includes our city partners, Dave and Megan have both been involved in this work as well. So. All right. Good morning. I am delighted to visit with you and give you all updates about what is happening with our middle housing work, specifically the code amendment processes throughout Tillamook County. Mark, I think, so I didn't say anything in the mission minute, but I think I'm hopeful that you will see that there are a few mission minutes throughout this presentation in the work that we have been doing countywide. And I want to thank the Housing Commission and our city planners, my staff, commissioners, our city councils and planning commissions who are helping us do this work, along with the consulting team that you guys have all met previously that did a presentation here. And then also DLCD, who's been a great partner in this work. So, all right. So just a refresher, I love crowd participation. What is middle housing? So I'm asking you guys and folks online. What is it? Early this morning. There's no test after this presentation, but this is important to me because as we all get ready to continue our hearings and speaking about these updates in communities, it's important to me to make sure that our core team of people that are helping to do this work understand what middle housing is.
I think of it as workforce
Okay,
housing.
Smaller developments in comparison to instead of large multi-family apartment complexes or a single family. It's the in between,
the middle.
the middle. So it's cottage clusters, or duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes is kind of how I see it.
Okay, that's great.
Everything between a single family home and a huge apartment building can be considered middle housing.
Okay. Anybody else?
Probably income, if we're gonna go with area median income, perhaps 100% and above.
Okay. Those are all good things. Anybody?
Value, I'd say between 250 and 450 on the pricing of the home.
Okay. That's the goal, right? Okay. How is that achieved?
Modest density.
Modest density, right? Things like housing production strategies. Right, to things that we're already doing, like our grant program, our financing, property tax exemptions, all of those things that help us take a project that could potentially cost a lot more and meet that target cost, right? Good morning. So middle housing, so the true definition of middle housing is basically housing that is up to 4 units. Up to 4 units. What we want middle housing to be, the goal of it, are the other things you've talked about: attainable, accessible, affordable, target price range. So it is single family, accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. So that's up to your 4 units. Up to 4 units in a townhome development, and then up to 8 units in a cottage cluster. So there's actually, I mean, if you think about it, that's quite a bit of options. But it goes back to the other thing you talked about. It's not a single family dwelling, but it's not an apartment, right? And thinking about what we know about our communities in Tillamook County, apartments aren't the answer everywhere. And I think as a lot of this work started many years ago, what popped in many people's minds was workforce housing equals apartments. And that's not the case. And we know in our conversations about affordability, what affordability truly means. And that is 1/3 of your income. But that's what makes middle housing and these types ideal and accessible for the work that we're doing, is because we can hit various price ranges for affordability, for workforce. These are scale developments that are more proportionate with our communities. This is work our contractors do and can do well. So that's why middle housing, those up to 4 units, those up to 8 cottage clusters, are really important work for our county. Okay, so I want to take a minute and talk about, there are 15 areas countywide that are part of these code updates. 8 of them are unincorporated communities. So each of the cities is taking on their charge and their work to update their residential zoning codes to allow for those middle housing types as outright permitted uses. I am working with the 8 unincorporated communities to get that work done. So a lot of the code is very prescriptive. Senate Bill 406, the regulations that we are working with to update all these residential zones in those 15 areas are largely prescriptive, which means the state is telling us what we need to adopt. But there's some options and choices that cities and communities can participate in. And the cities are doing that work with their planning commissions. I am getting ready to go back to the planning commission. I have been doing this work with our CACs, our community advisory committees. We've got several throughout the county. for our unincorporated communities. But these choices, so these community choices, largely fall along this list of plexes. Should they be attached or detached? Number of townhouses and cottages. So we know the prescriptive minimum, what we must allow for outright is 4 townhomes and 8 cottage clusters. That's what we have to allow. Clear and objective standards, straightforward, zoning building, might need a hazard report, but communities can decide to allow more outright. And so that's been a conversation along with some clear and objective design standards, specifically for 3 and 4 units and townhome development and cottage cluster. Parking, there's some options in terms of not requiring any parking, using on-street parking to satisfy parking requirements, or the most we can ask for is 1 off-street parking space per unit. So there's been a lot of community conversations about, well, what should parking look like? And I'll get into that a little bit more. And then driveway configurations. And that's where we have to take a step beyond the zoning piece and think about public works and transportation. So more about community choices. There's discussions about minimum lot sizes. So all of our communities and cities have established minimum lot sizes for most of their residential zones. There's options to reduce them or to keep them where they're at. And I am proud to say that I've got some unincorporated communities that are actually very progressive in their thinking. So this is one of those mission minute marks where they're like, you know what, we're okay reducing the minimum lot size requirement. We support additional housing opportunities in our communities. And it's been just a really neat experience to see as I'm working with these different groups and these different communities, that acknowledgement of we can really buy into this. We think this is important. And so others, especially when you take into topography, geologic hazard areas and different things, some of those minimum lot sizes are staying where they're at. Setbacks, there's been a lot of conversations about setbacks and looking at setbacks as if they are barriers or if they are really there to preserve that open space. And as they are already established, are they appropriate or should they be adjusted? And so been doing some work about that actually to say, we don't need that extra open space. A great example is Neatarts. They have a 40% lot coverage maximum. And what's interesting is in talking to the community and the working group, they didn't know that because it's been there so long. And they were like, wait, what? We have a 40% lot coverage maximum? And the consensus has been, get rid of it. That's a barrier. So in their own acknowledgement and awareness, there's been conversations about it's okay to remove some of these things. They don't serve a purpose and they don't meet our current needs and the purposes we are trying to serve. Plexes, there's been great conversations. I would say both at city levels and at community levels in terms of should they be attached or detached. Looking at community character, this has really come into play. Some communities are like, make it flexible. Look around. We've got all kinds of, we've got all kinds of eclectic types of housing styles and types and, whatever gives them the most flexibility to maximize development on their property. We don't care. Others have felt strongly that 3 and 4 plexes should be attached. So there's been variations in those conversations, community by community, but largely it's been, yeah, we're good with this, but let's figure out how we create the path forward in our community that fits our community character. Cottage clusters. There's been great conversations around cottage clusters in all communities about this new opportunity to address aging in place. Because as we all know, the demographics of a lot of our, communities and cities are older and people don't want to leave their communities and they're looking at cottage clusters as an opportunity to see development that can occur where they can stay in their community. And so that's been really exciting to see. most of the communities, I would say, are really looking at, there's some community choices for cottage clusters. 1 story versus 2 story. If you keep them 900 square feet or less, you can keep them at 1 story. If you allow for cottages greater than 900 square feet, they have to be 2 story. So this has gotten back into that discussion of what fits our community. And it hasn't been a no, this is a terrible idea. It's been what works best for us. And ADA accessibility has been at the core of these conversations where communities, and this is something for the Housing Commission to put on your radar, when we look at those housing production strategies, we've already talked about affordability and attainability. Accessibility is a really important piece of that to communities. They want to incentivize ADA units and how to get that done, which I think is really exciting. And then with that, some of the other conversations about cottage clusters has been, and I'll use Nesco and Dave as one of my conversations. That was one of my most personal favorites about cottage clusters. There's design choices. So each of us, the cities and myself working for the county, have talked to communities about design choices, open space requirements, pedestrian paths, landscaping, all these things that go into these regulations. But the thing that really resonated with me in talking to Nesco and at one of our meetings was this cottage has to have a relationship with the greater community. It needs to be designed in a way where the community is welcoming the cottage and the cottage development is a part of the community. So things like making sure there's trails and connectivity that go beyond the boundaries of that cottage cluster that welcomes both the people in the community and the people within that cottage development to have a relationship and interaction with one another. The other thing in terms of design standards were, we want design standards. We don't want design standards that create barriers. But what we want is we want quality development where people who live in that cottage or in that multifamily dwelling development are proud to be here. Nobody can drive by or walk by and go, that's where the affordable housing is. And I just thought that was just such a powerful conversation for a community to say, we want people to be proud to live here and we want them integrated and part of our community. So a couple more mission minutes on that. It was really great. And then again, those minimum design standards for middle housing that are clear and objective, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So one of the things that we found is that almost all of our residential zoning districts already allow for middle housing. A lot of it does require conditional use review. So one of the things that we are taking away is that process. With that, there's a lot of zoning districts, and I'll give a shout out to Bay City. They were almost there. They were already almost there. They've been very progressive and committed to looking at opportunities for housing. Parking requirements have been a strong area of focus. A lot of our communities and cities, they have narrower streets. I would say in unincorporated Tillamook County, we have that competition with people visiting for the day. We have the competition with short-term rentals and on-street parking. And so with parking requirements, I think everybody's landed to where we're all going after that one, at least that one off-street parking space requirement per unit. But with that, what plays into that is orientation of setbacks, specifically the front yard setback and maintaining those 10 and 15 foot front yard setbacks to create additional opportunities for off-street parking. Because now you've got a space there between the structures and the property lines to where with your driveway, you can create that. One of the other conversations we've had about parking is that we do believe that developers and contractors have that interest of the people they are building these housing units for. They know that people need parking, right? And giving that trust and extending that trust to know that there's going to be a thoughtful design, and parking is a big piece of it for a lot of the work that we're going to see. Floor area ratios and lot coverage maximums have been a very hot topic. I don't know if you've been on Facebook. I got a few communities that feel very strongly about these, and there's been a lot of media exchange. I am happy to share that I think we have moved past a lot of that and worked that out. But floor area ratios and lot coverage maximums are important to some communities in terms of making sure that the scale, the mass of the building, both on the ground and vertically, is proportionate to the size of the property. Like I said, NETART's 40% lot coverage, too low. They agree. They're like, we've got more land area to do things with. Nescoin has a 70%. It's working well, and I think that's where we're staying. Oceanside is at about 50, but there's some pieces to that, actually, to that community's credit, are looking at increasing that lot coverage maximum specifically for 3 and 4 family dwellings so that there can be a bigger envelope and more room for that housing type. Other things we've been talking about, so goal 7 requirements. So this is your hazard goal of your statewide planning goals. These requirements still apply. So what this means is that if you're in the coastal hazards overlay zone, if there's density limitations or extra geotechnical hazard reports required, you still got to comply. If you're by the beach and you need a dune area development permit, you still need it. Still need a geologic hazard report. Tsunami hazard overlay zone. So Kingfisher Apartments is a great example of how we integrated and complied with that overlay zone to require lighted paths and other things, signage, so that the residents know in the event of a tsunami or an earthquake, they know where to go to get to higher ground. Infrastructure and construction, having a lot of conversations about water and sewer. There's, there's still a requirement for water and sewer availability letters. Building codes still apply. Some of our fire departments have actually been more supportive of detached dwelling units than attached. And even though from a construction economic, making it pencil out piece, they understand that common wall construction is typically the best route. However, what they worry about are people putting holes in walls in that common wall construction, and now that firewall becomes compromised. Working through those conversations with them though, and I think a lot of their experiences come from existing multifamily dwellings that maybe didn't have those code requirements or weren't built to those code requirements, but an acknowledgement that, we have some of the most robust codes, building codes, in the world, arguably, at least in the United States. So, we're there. And then again, those driveway and road approach permitting requirements. So here's some of those design standards. So whether it's multifamily, 3 and 4 units, or townhomes, entrance orientation, minimum window coverage. So all of this is to ensure you don't see those flat still walls in a box. That's what communities are most concerned about, is they just don't want cubes. They want something that has some character to it. And so the entrance orientation requiring a porch, offsetting the unit walls by 18 inches or 2 feet. So you have some breakup. It could be paint colors where you see, the siding, one color, and then some sort of a border, and then a different color of the siding, on the lower part of the wall. Pitched roofs are really important. But again, all of these things are clear and objective. They don't require an architectural design review committee to ensure that they are being met. This is basic math where you can do the window area of a facade ratio or a porch. Your designer for your plan, they're already going to have a lot of this stuff on it. And one of the goals that we've talked about, going back to another mission minute, in visiting with communities and others, is the goal is to make simple design standards that are understandable by the person who wants to build it, the person who's paying for the build, and the neighbor. Anybody should be able to come in, and if they wanted to get a permit to build middle housing, the design standards are simple and clear. Townhomes, again, allowing up to 4 units outright. We can allow for more, just not less than 4, and they must be attached. So I think, across the county, there's some variations to that. With that minimum 1,500 square feet per, lot, per townhouse. The remainder of the area is open space. So with this comes a new introduction of expedited land divisions and land division opportunities that do not warrant a public hearing, but would be reviewed administratively with public notice. So the neighbors and your water and sewer districts, our fire departments, et cetera, would still be noticed. But there's been a lot of conversation about who owns the ground versus who owns the unit and how does that work, both for townhomes and for cottage clusters. And the simplest way to explain it is you have a piece of property. You can plat the individual units, whether it's townhomes or cottage clusters. And this is really important for accessible home ownership because we've got 2 goals: accessible rentals and accessible home ownership. And with the townhome and the cottage cluster concepts, those units can be platted for individual home ownership. They become the child lots, but the parent lot is still there. And the child never grows up. It never leaves the parent lot. So, there are arrangements then that need to be made for maintenance of utilities and infrastructure and whatever else is associated with that development. But ultimately, it will not increase like a townhome if you can build a 4-plex and then you plat it as a townhome, which we see. Yes.
That's happening a lot in Portland, and they're being subsidized for workforce housing as incentivizing individuals, in that middle income range. And
Right.
we spent the last year looking at them with our son, and he just on Monday became, I guess this is a mission minute, became a townhome owner in the city of Portland. And it's exactly that.
He bought a child lot.
He did. It's like a slice of bread and a loaf of bread that's cut in 4 pieces on a single family, what was once a single family dwelling lot. And it's in a neighborhood and there are a lot of them and none of them have any parking at all. The on-street parking is insufficient for what is being built, but
Yeah.
this is Portland and this is what, this is how we get people into home ownership. So now, he can build up equity instead of just renting forever.
And that's why that one parking space is so important. And if there is a garage and maintaining those front yard setbacks of 20 feet or 10 feet or whatever they are, it still gives that opportunity then for that driveway space, to create extra parking where those opportunities are there. So I'm going to go back to my drawing because it's just the simplest one. But again, with the townhomes, the idea of facade, breakup, character, pitched roof. So lot coverage and floor area. So as I mentioned, lot coverage and floor area can help kind of shape building mass. Well, how much of the lot, the ground is covered, but then also you have building height maximums, but what neither one of those talk about is the mass in between the ground and that height. You can have one without the other, but a lot of the conversations with communities is, do we need one? Do we need both? Do we need none at all? Are setbacks themselves just good enough? And that conversation has varied community by community. But this is a typical 7,500 square foot lot. So just if because I'm gonna ask you to come to hearings and do stuff later. So just to kind of give you a primer of what this looks like. So this is a 7,500 square foot lot. And with a 70% lot coverage maximum, basically it's the shaded area. But then if you think about mass, the shaded area then can also extend a vertical mass up to whatever the maximum building height is. Okay. So you still have your setbacks and different things there.
Sarah?
Yes.
Is there, and maybe I'm missing it, is there a minimum housing size?
Oh, that's a great question.
Because my neighbor
Yeah.
bought a lot right across the street. He bought a lot that had since the 70s, had a single wide mobile home on it. They sold it. Somebody cleared the lot, got sold again. The lot got sold for $250,000. He was going to build a tiny home on it. I was told we could not. I don't know if that's true, but
So some jurisdictions have minimum dwelling unit size requirements. A lot of areas that are governed through CCNRs and HOAs definitely have a minimum size requirement. Doing the math under building codes, it's about 270 square feet, 300 square feet is the smallest you could get with all of your turnarounds and your open space and your areas. Tillamook County does not have a minimum dwelling size requirement. Townhomes, or excuse me, tiny homes get tricky too, because it's not just about their size in our areas, it's how they were built. And so sometimes it's not a no to a tiny home. It's unfortunately, what you bought or what you want to buy has not been designed to meet our code, our building code requirements. And so there's that no can stem from a couple of different areas.
Could you say what the definition of tiny home is in this case?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
We're all trying to figure that out, and the state's working on that. So, that is one thing, working through that. Tillamook County, we do need a policy on tiny homes. So that's one thing that we're working on with the state and.
Is it the rough classification 900 square feet or less?
So that's a cottage. And that's one of our community choices, is to have a cottage cluster or a cottage not exceed 900 square feet.
I think the state classifies them as 400 and below for tiny.
That's where you start getting into RVs and stuff too, and if it's on wheels and how it's put together. So, yeah,
630, so.
we, yeah. So more to come on that, because that is definitely a hot topic and something we're working on. But here's floor area ratio. So this is a 5,000 square foot lot, and basically what floor area ratio means is if you have a 0.5 or 50% floor area ratio, your total floor area, regardless of the number of stories, cannot exceed 2,500 square feet. And that, for a single family dwelling, isn't that big of a conversation. But when you look at floor area for threeplexes, fourplexes, and duplexes, that becomes an entirely different story. So a lot of communities are really drilled down on, do we want floor area ratio? Is it important? Does it become a barrier? Right? Like, where's the line where it goes from being something that is effective, well-intentioned, something that meets community character and ensures maintenance of community character, to now it's a barrier. And so, I've got different communities in different places about floor area ratios for 3 and 4 dwelling units. So that is something we are working out through the month of April so that we can get ready for our hearings.
like, does area include each floor?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is a total of all floors. So for a single family dwelling, if you have a 0.5 floor area ratio, 2,500 square feet, manageable, doable. But when you take that same ratio and you apply it to 3 or 4 units, that's an entirely different story, because that means the total still is at 2,500 square feet. Those aren't very big units. Right? Okay, so so on a 7,500 square foot lot, floor area ratio total would be 3750, which again, for a single family dwelling, about average for our area. But when you start looking at multifamily dwelling units, that can become a barrier. So those are a lot, like, there's been a ton of very thoughtful conversations about this work with communities, and it's been just, again, a really neat process and experience. And so looking at the site plan, this shows you the difference between the two. If you're just talking about 70%, you've got the lighter gray that pulls out in that building mass dimension to meet the building height. Whereas if you did 2 stories with that floor area ratio versus lot coverage, this is how much open space you can have left. So then it becomes, again, is this really ideal for maximizing development potential on a parcel?
And could somebody put 3 or 4 stories on that lot?
They could, so right, so it depends on what the building height is. Most of our building heights were required through this process to have maximum building height set at least 25 feet. Most of the counties are at 35 and the cities are in between there as well.
Kristen, to answer your question, you can't go above 3 stories in
Because
Tillamook
of the
County.
fire, because of the fire.
Because of fire code.
Yeah.
The trucks can't reach in.
Well, it's considered high rise and then have enough full-time employees to have high rise training.
And for what it's worth on like, that concept of how many multiplex units can you get into this single family? And looking at all these examples in Portland, they're all at a minimum 1,000 square feet per unit and maximum about 1,200. We've looked at 4-unit, 6-unit complexes. And that's what they've been able to get on those single family dwelling lots. But yeah, there's 10 feet on, of setback basically on those examples.
Right, and that's so for looking at lot coverage and floor area ratio, especially for 3 and 4 units, townhomes. Some communities are putting a 6,000 square foot floor area ratio in their codes to be proposed. And then if you have 4 units, that puts them at 1,500 square feet each with a credit of, I want to say, 350 square feet or a garage that would not count towards the floor area ratio. So that you could have adequate living size. People don't feel like they're on top of one another. And again, that incentivizing that garage for additional parking with the setback. So there's been some really good strategy discussion in that to say, how can we maximize development, encourage development, incentivize it, but also take care to think about things like parking in our code updates. So this is a cottage cluster, proposing 10-foot minimum separation between structures. I've had a lot of conversations with fire departments about that and how important that is. Also, if these become child lots with the parent lot, everybody would have 5 feet on each side, even to just walk around and be able to maintain your building or, put a planter box out. But then the connectivity with the common courtyard, parking, there's specific standards to break up so many parking stalls with landscaping, so you don't see like a concrete, parking lot paved area.
There
in
was
some
one
of
of
that.
those it was built years ago, in Portland around, I want to say Southeast 72nd Division. Wonderful little homes. And, a common garden with,
Yeah.
community garden and, yeah, they sold immediately.
Right, and here's those 4 foot, so design standards requiring a 4 foot wide all-weather travel surface.
Yeah.
Pedestrian paths, so again, adding that ADA component. Portland actually has provisions in their model housing codes for visitability. Not visibility, visitability. And those go back, it's that intro into those ADA requirements to make housing units accessible. And so we are looking at that. I'm actually doing some work with the consulting team right now, because again, I've got several communities that really matters to them. They want to incentivize those types of designs and make them accessible. And then, yeah, some of our parking diagrams, so like that 6,000 cap, if we incentivize a garage that doesn't become part of that floor area ratio, you have your setbacks, you have the ability then to create additional parking areas just simply through design. So here's the process. So these are all of the things that we're working on. So right now, myself and the cities, we're here, we're rounding the corner on all of our amendments and final code drafts. They do require some amendments to our comp plan, right? So goal 10 is the housing element of our comp plan, then statewide planning goals. The county has been pretty progressive. Actually, back around 2010, the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners adopted policies within our goal 10 element that charge the county with providing more options for housing, specifically affordable and workforce housing. So we got some good stuff already in there. Where we're all at is either now or through this month, we all have to give notice to DLCD, so our state land use agency. They get 35 days before our hearings start to look at all of these draft code updates. And they're gonna let us know if we did something that isn't, consistent with what House Bill 2001 and Senate Bill 406 require. So we're all getting ready to go. Each of the cities will send in their one pop-up notice for their residential zoning districts. I'm sending in 7 because within each one of those communities, I've got zoning districts within eight within each one. So our next stop, we're all going to our planning commissions. The role of the planning commission through this process and hearings will be to make recommendations on these code revisions that for the board or the city council to consider for adoption. So we're here, everybody's here. We're getting ready to go to our planning commissions. The planning commissions then, it moves when our hearings proceedings are done there, those recommendations have been received. Myself and the other planners in the cities will then move to our board of commissioners and city councils, and they are the decision maker. So they're going to take our recommendations, community feedback, there's a lot of opportunities for community and public participation. And then the board and the city councils will adopt those. Measure 56 notices are not necessarily required for this work that we are doing. If we stay within House Bill 2001 and 406, we do not need to do Measure 56 notices.
What is that again?
So thank you, Kristen. So Measure 56 notices are required by law to be sent to all property owners within an area if there are regulatory changes that could impact their property rights or their property values. So basically, if there's a potential that a local jurisdiction is taking something away or reducing a development right that currently exists, the state requires us to send out these notices. So in terms of our communities, because I have very active CACs, I will be sending out notices to our CACs to share these hearings. Oceanside is the only community I have right now where I may need to do Measure 56 notice. And I'm waiting for some community votes on these changes to recommend to move forward that will determine if I have to do that. So removing barriers through housing. So some of the biggest things that we've seen is, again, communities being open to reducing minimum lot size requirements that essentially make more housing options available. Things like removing additional land area requirements through per dwelling unit. So some of our codes, like if you have 5,000 square foot lot requirement for single family dwelling, but then for a second dwelling unit, you have to add 2,500 square feet of land area. Things that, again, start really eating up the size of a lot and creating a barrier because you can't put more than one dwelling unit on it because you don't have all that, you don't have 2,500 square feet of additional land or 5,000 square feet. So removing those barriers, looking at lot coverage maximums, things that, I've talked about in some areas, not putting a limit on the number of cottage clusters. Some are saying, you know what, there's already enough design standards. The size of the land itself will determine how many units can go on. Let the property do that. There's things like SDCs, building code requirements that we cannot address through zoning. Those are separate. But the barriers that we are going to be able to address through these zoning code changes are huge. It includes a lot of time and cost and money of taking away those conditional use requirements and certainty with the process. So then project schedule. So this is where we're at. So we are right here and we're getting there. So I am pleased to say that for the most part, we have maintained our schedules and our goals. And so then with that, here is, some of these dates are subject to change, but here's where we're at. So I got this information. I meet monthly with all the city planners and managers. We do a check-in meeting. And so got these dates from them at our meeting the other week. So you can see Manzanita is on track for planning commission for April 14th. And you have this in your slides. And then June 4th for city council. Bay City and Rockaway Beach are right behind them. Megan's hustling through city of Tillamook. Garibaldi does not have a functioning planning commission at this time. Which I've never in my career have heard of that happening. But what that means is that their city council just hears everything land use related that requires a hearing. So everything's gonna move straight to city council. The council's having a briefing on these code updates on April 21st, and then their hearing date is to be determined. City of Wheeler is going through a pretty big leadership transition right now. They are recruiting for both planning staff and city manager. So the consulting team and I are stepping in. We are going to help Wheeler get these middle housing code updates across the finish line. So meeting with them and working on that. Nehalem was not at our meeting, so I'm not quite sure what their schedule is, but I will share that. And then, so where I am at is a planning commission workshop on April 24th. So be preparing them that evening, kind of giving them largely what we've been talking about, giving them some draft code language to start looking at, to prepare for the hearings that are coming. Because I have several communities with several zoning districts in each one, I am going to have to break them out. So I will probably be the last one to finish. And because I go to the planning commission and the board of county commissioners, I'm thinking sometime in July. So, this is our hearing schedule, for all of us, and I will keep you posted and Parker posted on all of that because we need your help. We desperately need your help. We would love to see you all at workshops and hearings. We would love your testimony at hearings to help remind and reinforce and validate how important this work is, and submit written testimony, sharing information with other people you know. And then, of course, that support through the public education and outreach committee. You know, this is a big deal. This is probably, I would say, within my lifetime in my career, probably some of the biggest and most meaningful work that I will do. And your support and help to reinforce and validate the significance of these actions and why we need them is really going to help make these processes successful.
Sarah, is there going to be some talking points? I'm thinking about attending a couple of these in my local community. Is there a one pager or some talking points so that we could provide oral testimony at the hearings?
Yes.
That can be provided sooner than later.
I would love to give some stuff to the public education and outreach committee in Parker and have them put those together for you guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it would have to be, I mean, we're looking at what, 2 weeks less for some of these original hearings.
Yeah. And yes, and that's why I wanted you guys to have that schedule of what I know so far. So, yes.
Request for Nan's help. I can do it too, but I think we need to get some employers
Yes.
to be at these, to just provide testimonial.
We had, well, and you were one of them with the hospital when Senate Bill 406 was going through the legislative hearing proceedings. We had major employers testify and write letters. I think it's really important.
Yeah, we need specific examples and, you know, not just statistics and numbers and the human side of it.
Well, and this, so, you know, some of the things that we talk about too is market rate housing. We talk about housing for management and executives. Middle housing is that too, right? So when we talked in the beginning about what middle housing is, we didn't talk about that piece. But the reality is that this is This is for everybody. You know,
Economic viability and sustainability.
Well, yeah, that's something that you know, we talked about and in conversations with our consultants who are doing our housing needs analysis, one of the things that I brought up was, you know, are we taking into account the effect that this will have on the market pressure for vacation and second homes? Because these code changes allow for more units to go on, say, a view lot. Will that reduce the demand for housing that is better suited for, you know, full-time occupants? And so basically, with this expanded ability to put more units onto high-value tourist-based kind of lots, what does that do to ease the pressure on the rest of the land available? And so we'll also have this kind of feedback from the consultants who will be able to quantify that to some level.
and our work is not done when this is done. So that's the other message today. We're just getting started. Once this work is done, there's the housing production strategy piece. There's the other pieces, because again, when we talked about middle housing in the beginning, think about all of the comments that were shared that are not related to zoning. So that is phase 2. And that's where, again, the Housing Commission is an integral part of that work. And I have been recruiting help for you. So just so you know, in every community, you know, talking about ADA incentives and different things, I'm like, you need to come to the Housing Commission. You need to help us with with development of those housing production strategies. There are community members across our county that have really good ideas and they want to help, which is that final mission minute. We got some that are resistant. I've got a few areas where it's, you know, getting them through this process is going to be difficult. And I'm very sensitive to their feelings about that, you know, because it is a change and I want to recognize, you know, how they feel about that. But there's a lot of people out there that want to help and have bought into the importance of this work. And I think that's super exciting too.
I think Madison has a question online.
Yes, Dave.
No, I was just gonna comment, it's good to see that this is going further in with the housing production strategy and all the next steps. I mean, with economic opportunities, when we had the commercial demands back in, what was that, 2015 or so, there was nothing that went beyond that. And now it's good to see that we're taking a next step. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so that's what I got to share today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Did you have a question?
I have a question.
Mhm.
So with all this change happening and things hopefully progressing, where is Tillamook County at in having a active building official brought back on?
Yeah, so I have an applicant now that looks promising, so I'm getting ready to reach out for that interview. We're recruiting. You know, Oregon is tricky in that there are so many codes and so many certifications and such a robust, stringent program, right? I mean, I get applications every once in a while from all over the states, but we're different than Arizona. I guess it's just, you know, the bottom line for that. What I also like about this middle housing work up to the 4 units is that this is work we can handle in-house, especially with, oops, sorry about that. Especially with, they are taking 4 units out of the commercial code and putting them into the residential specialty code, which means we can do that work. We can do that work here. So still recruiting, but looking forward to the fact that we can handle this.
You mean our local builders?
Our local, and in office. So as Chris asked, because I've been serving as building official again since December, we're in active recruitment for a building official. They are kind of like unicorns in the forest. As are electrical inspectors and plumbing inspectors, like there is, you talk about deserts of working professionals. This is a very serious issue for all of us. But to Chris's, you know, question, we are recruiting, but in terms of middle housing, sorry, what I like is that, we can do this work in-house because it does fall under the residential specialty code. So,
Thanks.
Lots of county has different zoning codes.
Correct.
And building codes than Tillamook County.
they have different zoning codes, they're nuanced differently, we all have to follow the statewide planning goals, but we are all under the same building codes.
The reason I ask, I don't know how many of you have been up to Seaside lately. And I go up there frequently, and there was a housing development that I thought this might be low income or Section 8, because it was done, I believe, cheaply. And it had, they're kind of tall and with a, where you come to town.
They're on the highway.
Yeah, right as you come to town, and they have tiny, no windows on the bottom. 3 tiny windows, tiny, on 3 sides. And you don't do it on the 4th side because the other one, the building is right up next. And I thought, well, maybe they were trying to reduce costs in building Section 8. It turns out I just saw this, they're STRs.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's called the Commons. And they're short-term rentals.
Auto.
And they're ugly.
Right.
And I thought, okay, so I thought, Clatsop County has very different codes.
Yeah, well, but that gets to the design standards. That's why, so using that as an example,
yeah.
that's why those window facades, all of those clear and objective design standards become super important, is because, you know, going back to what communities have said, we want it to look, we want people to be proud to live here. We don't want it to look like it's a,
Yeah,
a project.
interesting.
Question?
Yes, Dave.
So is the primary impetus behind this to make housing more affordable?
Yes.
And I guess the way it accomplishes that is making the cost of land per unit or per square foot more expensive.
That's one of the ways, yes.
Are there other ways that it's making it housing more affordable?
Well, just the fact that you can add additional units to the lot, right? So you're adding,
Increasing supply.
yeah, you're just increasing supply.
Well, I guess
Scale.
that's when I think of it, the cost of land per square foot of building, that certainly would occur, yeah.
Well, the size of the units is smaller, and so the affordability is increased inherently by this.
And then there's also economies of scale of building more units at one time
Right.
versus
Yeah.
single family.
Mhm.
Because then you can,
For me,
for
the
buying
big
power.
impetus of this is creating pathways for home ownership that currently are non-existent. Or
Right, so, just in rough terms, I keep thinking that, currently housing costs, all-in costs are about $400 a square foot. Chris, am I in the ballpark there?
That's where a lot of contractors are at. I mean, you can still. Highline homes starts at about 250 a square foot. But there's anywhere from 190 up, but it's all incremental in your finishes, and they like to jack prices way up and start adding stuff. Custom houses, yeah, 400 is a fairly accurate number. I tell most clients, if you can't budget 300, then you have to really scale back your design elements.
And then with regard to multifamily units, like triplex, fourplex, do you have some thoughts about what the cost per square foot there are?
Well,
it's not a lot smaller.
it's not a lot cheaper, but it's more effective from a building aspect. We have a lot in town, we're gonna put 4 tiny houses on.
Yeah.
You can build them synchronized, where once the buildings go up, your subcontractors can just rotate. Anytime you're not paying a mobilization for people coming in and out, and you can just chain them together, you're gonna save money. That's the one advantage to multi-units, is you can produce at a lower cost because you're not in and out so much.
So maybe $300 a square foot for multi-units, might.
Oh, yeah, I mean, our tiny houses, I think we have budgeted about 230 of them.
Okay.
Wow.
So, but I mean, they're very simple design, concrete floors. I mean, they're going to be rentals, so they're designed in an aspect to keep maintenance low and anticipate high traffic and hardware and tear. So a lot of it's just how you design it, how you finish things.
So with respect to your earlier comment about trying to hit a price range between 250 and 400,000 in this middle income, middle housing range, and at 1,000 square feet at $250 a square foot, it'd be 250,000. So we're getting there, certainly.
Well, but that's cost of the build. I mean, right now in Tillamook County, I know because we've been looking for one of our kids. You can't go buy a double wide trailer house on 2 acres for less than $450. I mean, it's just, the supply does not meet the demand. And anytime you're in that ratio, everybody jacks the prices up because there's only so many on the market.
There's only so much land to build
Yeah.
on, and there's only so much land for sale, and that's driving.
And the problem right now, all of the housing, all of the mass housing projects that have happened in Tillamook County in the last 10 years has all been low income. Because a lot of the developers like the government subsidy that they get paid for keeping rent low, which has left our working class with nothing, because between house rentals and just not enough on the market, people don't have options. We're restricted so much with the ability to develop, whether it be land use, flood, plains, fire department keeps us from going taller. Infrastructure in all of our communities in the county can't handle higher density than what's being proposed now. Tiny house clusters, cottage clusters is a very easy way to put more doors into availability. But same thing, every community you go to, you have restrictions on the ability to do that because of infrastructure.
And then you have the SDC fees times however many units you're putting on, which becomes another factor.
Well, but
That'll be a
That,
housing.
that's iffy, because Wilhite Apartments paid $1,800 for their sewer hookup because they ran one 12-inch line.
Oh.
And I looked at the sewers, I go, you wonder why you can't pay to fix anything? The apartments in Garibaldi was almost 700,000 for the same service. So like I said, unless they come up with a range to be able to have the ability to do more, I mean.
I have Aaron raised her hand.
Well, we've moved way past conversation, but just to say the other reason, the other cost-effective piece of doing this work is that it gives developers certainty. They don't have to go through the process of asking for a variance. So time is money when you're holding on to a piece of property. So there's just that goes into it that probably doesn't fit in as cleanly to the square cost per square foot that Chris was talking about, but it's also a key piece to that affordability. You can go, yep, I want to do 6 of these, and I found 6 lots in the neighborhood, and I know I can do them. I can do them all together, or to Chris's point, I could put all 6 cottage clusters on here and build them at the same time, because I know that it's allowed, as opposed to that stop and go process that certainly if you look at Kingfisher as a great example of something that got caught in stop and go, not that that would have been in here, but just that process that makes it more cost efficient and cheaper.
Well, the tiny house project I bought, the lady spent 2 years jumping through hoops to get it approved. So taking that time frame away from the ability to say, yeah. I mean, I laugh now because everybody I know owns duplex lots. I'm like, why would you get 2 rents when you can get 4? I mean, it's pure economics at that point.
I got 2 things. One, just to SDC fees and what the state is doing to help us with that. The state is building a program that will allow cities to defer the SDC payments till the end of the project, and the state will back that. So project starts and then it fails, the state will come in and pay the city the SDC fees for the failed project. So it's a state-backed fund that will make it so that cities will feel comfortable delaying SDC fees till the end of the project. Doesn't solve the problem of high SDC fees, but it does give a little bit of relief for the actual build process. So you don't have to start paying until you're taking in rents, essentially. I also wanted to show you guys one thing really quickly. This is a survey I did with the realtors. And, gosh, that is really small. Let me see if I can zoom in here. Why is this not full screen? Oh, Sarah, can you make it full screen?
Yes, I would love to.
Thank you. And I just wanted to show you guys this because it shows, this was a question I asked them with an instant survey result. And the question was, what are the key barriers to attainably priced housing in Tillamook County? And the ones you'll see here, this is construction costs, but this is zoning. And this was their, construction cost and zoning were identified as the two major barriers to housing here. And that's just important that as we go out there and engage with these communities, know that even the realtors still have this perception of zoning being this giant barrier that is being removed now.
I'm
So,
going to them next.
yeah, so just so you guys know that this is the public perception, that zoning is this big barrier. And as it becomes not the barrier, let's shift the focus to the other things that we can address. So that's just my little tiny bit of data.
Parker, what was that one in the middle? That was the next tallest.
The next, infrastructure availability, and then it's regulations and building codes and the lack of tax exemptions and incentives. And then it was land costs, labor availability, and then other. And if you guys want, I can do this survey for you guys too, and we can find out what this room thinks. And it's really fun. It comes back right away, maybe next month. Yeah.
Well, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Sarah. And I'm happy to see here that Senate Bill 406, as much work as we did through the legislative process, that it is coming to fruition and making the next steps. And I look forward to supporting that going forward. And next we have Michelle, if she's ready, for the CHNA presentation.
Yes, so bear with me if talking causes me to cough, so presenting may cause problems.
That's what it Stay on mute. All your speakers.
Okay, so I don't need to have those on to present.
No.
Okay, sorry, should have asked.
Harry's picking you.
Great, okay.
I'll go ahead and do a pop out here too.
Okay. Yay, it worked. Christmas miracle. All right, so I wanted to, as probably most of you, if not all of you already know, every 3 years we do a comprehensive data analysis of what's driving health and health disparities in our county. And from that data, we select top priorities to work on each 3-year cycle. So the data analysis is the community health needs assessment, and the work plan to address the top priority areas is called the community health improvement plan. So it's a CHNA and a CHIP. Housing has been in this current cycle's CHIP, and it will be again in the next cycle. So that's high level, in case I have a bout of coughing and have to abandon. Those are the takeaways today. I'm gonna keep it short. This is a process that is used throughout the country. It's a requirement for our public health department, for our hospital, and for the mental health counseling center, for the other federally qualified health center in Nehalem. We all are obligated to conduct this process and provide reporting to the IRS. In our case, as a hospital, as a nonprofit. And to the state of Oregon specifically, again, specific to the hospital, we have a minimum spending floor of reinvestment as a nonprofit, upwards of about $6 million a year. And we meet most of that through charity care, write-offs of unpaid medical bills. So, but we also would make intentional investments in improving community health through my role, my entire half of my role is part of that investment. So this is a rigorous process that involves multiple steps. And in Tillamook County, the partners talking about economies of scale, instead of each of these individual organizations conducting this analysis, we are teaming up and collaborating. This is our third cycle. And each iterative cycle, we have done a better job of getting more organized and coordinated in our efforts to look at this data and engage in measurable, meaningful actions around it. So these are the organizations that are involved in our CHNA. All the ones I mentioned, as well as the Tillamook County Wellness Advisory Committee. And that's the Tillamook County Wellness is a program of Tillamook County Public Health. It is, the advisory members are appointed by county commissioners, and the process is baked into our county health improvement plan as a county, not just, we've extended it beyond what was happening before this last iteration. We use a framework that was developed by CARES in the University of Michigan. It is an acronym. I don't know what it stands for. But this is a common framework broken out into health needs, basic needs, and social needs of what we know is contributing to health outcomes. So these are the main areas that we look for, categories that we try to discern from the data, which of the areas are causing the most impact on the health of our community members. We collected 300 community surveys, and we conducted focus groups, key informant interviews, and we have a huge body of secondary data that we look at. When you go to the doctor and you answer a depression screening, or you say how many drinks of alcohol you have a week or a month or whatever, all that data gets rolled into this. Census data, claims data for Medicaid, all of that is informing this process. So that body of secondary data has 45 data sets and 150 unique metrics. Primary data is direct from the source. These were the themes that emerged the most frequently based on each of those sources. You can see housing and financial stability, which go hand in hand here, are in all of those categories. I won't get into the weeds here, but we do really drill down into what people are saying, especially in that survey itself, because some of those secondary data sources are kind of old. Some of them are 3 years old. And so, you know, thinking about COVID, what was relevant in 2020 versus 2017 versus 2023, big differences, right? So, you kind of have to take some of that with a grain of salt and really listen to what people are telling us right now. Some more. About 2/3 of the people said that they got the care they needed.
Housing options is the number one on the
Yeah. Thank you for pointing it out. Yeah.
Just in case you guys can't say it, it says select the resources the community needs more of to help you live better. And the number one is housing options.
Housing is considered the number one social determinant of health. So this is what our secondary data tells us. And again, this is not perfect data because of the timeliness of it, but this is a scoring measure of 0 to 100 of those 12 categories that I showed you earlier. And based on that secondary data, health conditions is our most pressing priority. Housing is the second. And you can see what our top areas of concern were. Good example of the lag in the data is that food security is at a positive score of 24 here, but with inflationary pressure that's not a reality for people in our community. So, we do have good, really, robust networks of support for food insecurity in Tillamook County, and they do a great job, but people are still food insecure here. So health, we have a higher than average percentage of people in Tillamook County compared to other counties in Oregon and the US with cancer, with heart disease, COPD. That one's a really big one, COPD. And I think this one is hearing acuity. We also have a population that skews older, but this again ties to our housing needs, right? A lot of people that are aging in Tillamook County and they need housing. If you have COPD and you have a leaky roof, that is a huge problem, and you're going to end up in our emergency department. So it goes hand in hand. Housing comparisons. You can see that we are significantly more cost burdened on housing and transportation than other parts of the state. And it was significantly higher percentage of students experiencing homelessness. And this isn't a conservative rate. This is, I'm sure, significantly higher than what is actually showing up in the data. If you can't see those numbers, it's 63% for housing cost burden versus 54% for the state in the United States. And then homelessness in youth is 5.6% for Tillamook, basically double the state and more than, well, close to double the state and double the US. So the advisory committee, and Parker's on that committee. Okay. And we have Commissioner Fournier also on it. So we used a scoring rubric to tease out what we felt were going to be the most impactful ways to address some of these issues. Some of the reflections from the committee were that rather than just saying we're going to address health conditions, we really wanted to step back and say what's impacting health conditions. Well, we know housing is, we know access to social determinants of health, community infrastructure. These are major drivers. If we can fix those things, we should see those rates come down. Big point of conversation, housing affects everything. That came up loud and clear. And then health risk behaviors are impacted by mental health, and financial stress impacts mental health. We know that. So if we could get these cost of living factors under control, that could really help with a lot of these other issues. And then under community infrastructure, some of the subcategories include childcare and transportation. And so that's why that even though it's lower in the scoring, it was viewed as, because childcare is, we have an equally dire childcare scenario as we do housing. Only 6% of children under 2 of the demand is being met for childcare. So families that have children 2 and under, or 94% of those families are not finding the childcare they need, and therefore they are not working because they're home taking care of their kids. And so then they're not making the income to be able to afford the rents, to buy the mortgage or pay the mortgage. This is all just part of, the larger set of factors that are influencing people's ability to thrive or not.
When I was there when this was initially presented, and it was called out that childcare in this kind of data gathering sense, a way to think about it is essentially like a write-in other, and the community health needs analysis, this is the first time that this group had ever seen childcare elevated all the way to this health needs. So just so you know, the significance of seeing childcare up there is basically enough people wrote in on the other section, like childcare as a health need, that it got elevated all the way up. So
Yeah.
And childcare lack of childcare is one of the main reasons that there's short staffing
Mhm.
in the tourism and many industries, because childcare, the parent could work part-time at least and make money and, contributing to the household, and if it's not available, they can't work.
Yeah, and it's not only that, what, if you can find a slot, it's not affordable.
Yeah.
It doesn't pencil out,
Sure.
just like the housing situation.
Yep.
It doesn't pencil out.
You would work.
Yeah.
So cottage clusters, actually, there's provisions for accessory buildings, and one of the uses that could be allowed is a daycare. So they're limited to 900 square feet, but if there was a cottage development and somebody wanted to do a little daycare there on the property, they could.
Just to connect
Great
middle
idea.
housing codes to
Yeah.
current health needs,
Some very relevant synergy, I think, between these two and some of the larger project opportunities that this body is looking at, like with the Raw property or with McCrae's property in Bay City, that these are some opportunities that we should be really keeping in mind. So the final selection of priorities, health priorities, or high needs, were access to care, community infrastructure, housing, and mental health. And interestingly, housing didn't even require a vote. There was unanimous consensus that it had to be in there. And then there was a lot of deliberation about the other three. Because it was like, well, if we address mental health, will we have the impacts we need on health risk behaviors like drug addiction? Or do we deal with drug addiction and hope that mental health, like cart, horse, egg, chicken, kind of discussions?
Something I brought up when we had that discussion was that, part of the problem with housing being kind of at the center of all of these different problems is that we often lack the infrastructure to communicate across, people who can do something about housing, to the people identifying the health needs aspect of it, to the people identifying the economic impacts of it. And while we have the Housing Commission and the Wellness Council, there's still kind of this missing place where these things can come together. And so as you guys are out in the community, I hope you look for those opportunities to find places where those bridges can be built.
Yeah. And for me, all of this is about economic development. It's about economic vitality for our county, as much as it is about helping individuals with their health needs. Because if we aren't doing that well and comprehensively, we are not creating a sustainable economy. And we currently do not have a sustainable economy in Tillamook County. But it's getting better, and we are doing the important work. And there are convergences where we are looking more big picture with collective action. And that's probably a good segue to what's next and what we would invite you to be part of if you're interested. There'll be a report that's published in December of the needs analysis, and then the CHIP development takes place starting on May 1st. There's a workshop in person at Tillamook Bay Community College where we're convening all interested individuals and partners to identify the things that are already aligned with those categories that we just looked at, and kind of like, the dream ideation of what's possible if we think innovatively and collaboratively. There'll be another workshop in July to actually select the projects and the goals and that we're going to track and monitor and intentionally invest in as a county. And then in September, we'll wrap that up with an evaluation measures and produce a report. So if you want to get involved, or you think of people that should be involved in this, that's when the event will be, is 2:30 to 4 at the college. You can email me to get added to the invitation. I encourage you to subscribe to the Tillamook County Wellness e-newsletter. It will have information about some of these activities. There may be opportunities to volunteer or to advocate, like the way that we are here for housing specifically. And when I say support, it may extend a financial support. Like, do you have the means to support building infrastructure in something, or do you have the means to provide, just like we're asking if you own land, are you willing to help be part of the solution? So as we develop this chip, there will be ways that other organizations and community members can contribute. I think that's it. Any questions for me? I appreciate your attention and I apologize for my voice. Thank you.
Childcare statistic just gobsmacks me every time.
It's so disheartening.
And that housing being such a community health thing.
Next we have housing coordinator report. Parker.
Hey, that's me. Few quick updates for you guys all. The Board of County Commissioners has approved your allocation recommendation for the Housing Production Solutions Fund, and we will now go into contract negotiations with each of the recipients. The feedback survey that went out for this Housing Production Solutions Fund application period and valuation period was largely positive. A little bit better than last year, but a couple areas that are still identified as needing some work. And so over the next month, we will be putting forward some potential changes and solutions for improving our process. And I'll be back next month to share what I've come up with, but also as we go through committee meetings this month, I hope each committee takes a moment to consider what they saw as something that they'd really like to see changed or improved. Yeah, the housing needs analysis is underway, and we'll be having our second meeting with the FCS consultants soon. And I shared a little bit about that realtor survey with you, but I did go to the realtors and present to them. And they had some interesting feedback that I got to share a little bit earlier. But those are my updates, and I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
EPA money, any progress?
Currently, it is good, but for how long, who knows? So we keep getting updates, and they have progressed to the RFP for the technical advisors, and they are finishing that work up either last week or this week. It could already be done. Once a technical advisor is in place, projects that wish to apply, their first stop will be to start working with the technical advisor. They'll make sure that the project fits into the framework of the rebate, and together they will move forward. We really crafted this in such a way that different levels of projects can take advantage of it in different ways. So if you are an individual homeowner looking for some help for an ADU, there are certain sets of standards that apply as you get larger and larger. There's other things like material choices and whatnot that the technical advisor will help the projects work through. But for now, that money is on. And we will keep you updated about it because, as you all I'm sure are aware, subject to change. Yeah.
So can we publish anything about this yet?
I think I would suggest we wait until the application is ready to go, until you can actually begin talking to the technical advisor. Because I won't be able to answer many of the questions that they would. And so it would just probably create a burdensome amount of interest and work at this point that I would then be putting people into a holding pattern. So I prefer to really start shouting and celebrating that when we 100% go live and DEQ and the technical advisor is ready to start with the application intake. That should be done by the end of Q2.
Is this one the one that they reimburse you after the?
Yes.
Because I would prefer to wait till we actually have money, but then that really puts it off, so.
Well, and what they'll do is they will kind of approve you. And then you can take that, you can put it into your funding stack, take it to your bank, let them know
Yeah,
that this funding's coming on the other end. And so it is good to get it out there because there is lead time on this. But if we're a little too early, I don't want people to express interest, get put into a waiting and then have to reach back out. It will be more simple if we can just let DEQ, when they're ready to start accepting them, start pushing everybody there all at once.
And we're talking about from a simplistic point of view. When DEQ is ready, who has the money? Does the federal government? When is a check cashed is a very important piece of it.
So I believe that how it works is, DEQ has access to a payment portal from the federal government. And as long as they have access to that portal, the money is in there and waiting. What has happened in the past when this has gone away is that their access to that portal was cut off. And so that is a different thing, but the money has been allocated and I forget the other word from Congress. And that all happened ahead of any executive orders that would upset this. And it is, the current understanding is that anything that happened before that point that was allocated by Congress takes an act of Congress to undo. Anything that came in after that is a different story. Everything that is somewhere in between, we will work it out in court. It's kind of
That a result of litigation?
that is a result of ongoing litigation, and so all of this could change as precedent is set with new different court cases. But in my opinion, of all of the grant money out there that has been tied up in any way, shape, or form, ours is on the most secure, guaranteed side as you possibly can be, while accepting that nothing is guaranteed right now.
It's as good as it looks as good as it can.
Yeah, we are of
It looks as good as it smells.
all the gin joints in all the world, we are in the right ones. Any other questions about ongoings? I will be back with a more expansive report next month.
All right, next is a kind of a bylaw update conversation. It came to our attention on the very last page of our bylaws that we actually have a little bit more of a time frame to work with. That our bylaws or any recommended changes have to go to the Board of Commissioners every 4 years. So our assumption of every 2, internal review is we're going to be ahead of the game if we begin this process now, because we technically have to put this forth in front of the commissioners by March of 2026. So what we'd like is for you to take the time, not necessarily today, but please review them in the next couple probably meetings.
Yeah.
And that we will check back in probably in our midsummer when we're having something to do. This would be something that we will want to bring back up for any changes. So we are actually ahead of the game. So I apologize for leading us astray.
No apologies for being ahead of the game.
But I'm hoping that I'm really hoping that we don't really have any huge substantiated changes. But if there's anything, this is supposed to be a living document. So if there is anything that we need to bring forth, do expect it on the agenda going forward. And if you do have any particular comments or notes on changes, please share that with us in the interim too. So that way we can note it and just bring it forth. Thank you. And I guess we're moving actually pretty quickly this morning. So Dave with a finance committee update.
Okay, well, let's see, of course, our primary objective was the Housing Solutions Fund efforts, and that's behind us now. With regard to this remarkable but elusive Ag Workers Housing Tax Credit, we made 4 presentations, 3 to farmers and 1 to a fisherman. As you may remember from last month's meeting, we recently learned that a farmer will need to have an OSHA review, which may be a problem. But with regard to the fishermen, we're closest on that. That's Mr. Wong's development in Rockaway, and I think they're excited about doing that. And that could be a significant source of funding for them. So we may get one win out of all this effort. Hopefully so. I talked to them yesterday, and they're just about ready to make an application. So we'll keep you updated.
We still need to talk to Jacobson, see if we can't find it, if that will work for them.
Well, I'm still curious about the smoker and Warner's.
Yeah, the smoker, yeah, because they have that lot across the street, and I think Dave Madison said the very top back end of that lot would be an okay spot, so. Does anybody know anybody C-suite smoker?
Not anymore.
Okay, if anybody does come across that kind of contact, please forward it to me.
I had a contact, but it was during that transition when the smoker was bought by private investors or something.
Yeah.
But he's been on a long time and I've reached out multiple times with no response.
I'll go to corporate.
Wonder if Gary Wright. So I was thinking Gary Wright's a little
In
contractor.
contact with management.
Yeah.
All right, I'll reach out. Thank you.
All right, moving on, we have a legislative committee. We had a meeting last week with both the representatives from the executive committee and the legislative committee, and shared some of the work, our working document. So going forward, for the Housing Commission, we are going to be, if we are going to be putting towards providing testimony or letters to the legislation, we are going to be, we've been instructed that we need to remain neutral on any sort of legislation. So therefore, we have to basically just provide context or explanation on why something may or may not work within a neutral framework. I did step up, and if there is something that we want to kind of champion, I personally said I would sign a letter on just basically as just a community member to support that legislation. So if there is anything in particular, we are right now, the bills have set a deadline to be at either scheduled for a public hearing or a workshop at this point through the first stage of the legislative process. So if they were started in the House, started in the Senate, they have now been either have to was set for public hearing and or a public workshop. Those so we kind of have an ability now to narrow those down to what is still live, because there's probably about 50% of the bills that we kind of started with are now dead in legislation because they had to have been scheduled for a hearing in the first stages. Those bills that have been scheduled, if they're going to proceed, they will go to the opposite side. If they're carried in the Senate and passed through the Senate, they will then go to the House, and that will provide another opportunity for us to provide comment or share that information. And one thing to note, Parker did kind of do a big review of several pieces of legislation this year. And we have discovered that majority of those bills and those proposed legislation were written by AI. So therefore, that has kind of expanded our workload to where we are personally, just with all of our workloads, that has just increased the number of bills that have been put forth this session.
AI on its own or run by
Has to be written.
It has to be written from.
AI said, hey, write a bill that includes the following aspects for the Oregon legislature, and then they just submitted it. Nobody was able to provide a reason why there are twice as many bills this cycle as normal. And so I grabbed a couple and put them into AI detector and found the reason myself.
So that is why we don't necessarily have this great big list. Usually by this time, we have a big list and hey, these are the bills that we're watching. That is essentially is the number of bills put forth this session. So our goal, hopefully going forward, was I think we decided that we're going to be weekly.
Yeah, I think weekly.
Going forward.
Starting
just
next week.
Starting next week at 4:00 on Wednesdays. We're going to just do a quick shout out in Zoom, and we have an active workbook, so we're going to try to keep those up. But I do apologize. That's why we're not giving you a whole bunch of slew of bills and saying, hey, this is what we'd like. Because there's just, now we're thinking we might be to a point where we can actually have a workable list.
I'll try at the end of those meetings every week through the legislature to put out in emails, putting like what the ones that we identified this week as looking promising and moving forward that you should be paying attention to.
Well, the other thing we talked about that's pretty important here is we decided to prioritize monitoring the bills that don't have any financial implications because so much of that is federal funds passing through the state. And that's in such, uncertainty that rather than chasing all of those tails around, that may lead to lack of fruition. There are some, you mentioned one specifically and then,
Lot size.
was it, I thought it was the revolving loan fund or something.
The middle income revolving loan fund or
Yeah.
I think I mentioned the SDC deferral last time.
Okay.
Yes.
There's
As
a
an
few
example.
Example
Yeah,
of bills that would have positive impacts for us that aren't dependent upon any federal funding sources.
minimum lot size was another
Yeah.
one. There's a bill.
Oh,
that-
yeah,
Yeah.
our
Yeah, that's considering lowering the minimum lot size of rural residential zones to 1 acre. And that has survived. It's the first workshop.
We will keep you all apprised, hopefully a little bit more engaged throughout the process. But if there's any time that you're interested in know what's going on, feel free to pop into our meeting. And I believe Parker has the link online. So we will be going forth and hoping to do more work.
Should I add a bill tracker to our website? Premature?
Yeah, I think we're probably premature, but I'd happy to share it with the commission,
Yeah, and I think,
members of the commission that are interested.
yeah, let's put together a short list one so we don't overwhelm people with all of them.
I would think we'd want to, on a public version, just to keep it small and concise rather than this very large, enormous
Another
workload.
thought though is that we could use AI to streamline the bills that we're tracking. Like if we were able to put in the criteria that are priorities to us and run those bills through that filter, maybe we'll have a better chance at tracking relevant bills.
I will ask, I'll see what ChatGPT comes up
Okay,
with.
okay.
We'll use AI
Yeah.
for us as well.
Yeah. Don't feel bad
Like
for
fire-
writing letters with AI anymore.
All right, well, moving on, Michelle, do you want to give us an update on outreach?
Well, I'm going to defer to my committee members because I was in Key West enjoying myself.
That's right.
Did go to the meeting, and so I really don't know. I haven't really talked to anybody. I should have touched base with you guys beforehand.
What did we do?
Been a lot going on. I think we've had more meetings last month than any other month.
Yeah.
Just all across the board.
Well, we did talk about the EPA funds, the status of it, and also the Manzanita project,
Yeah, that was big.
which Parker said that we really need people to show up at the city council meeting on April 9th. I think it is.
It's like 14.
I think it's 14th is one, right?
14 at 4?
Yeah. 14th is for Mark. I believe that's correct.
Yeah, Mark and I for sure have committed to attending that, but it wouldn't be a bad idea to have. I think you need to have a lot of bodies in the room. Not everybody needs to talk.
Digital meeting for this one.
Oh,
for the
that's right.
planning
So a lot of
council.
faces on the
Yeah.
screen, I guess.
Yeah, that still will have the same impact. But
Yeah.
of all the times when we've asked people to show up, I think that this might be one of the most important. Just to remind you, this project has been in the works for over 5 years. So a lot at stake here.
And the reason is because there's been a recent
It's been appealed.
objection by an
Neighboring.
adjacent homeowner in a different city that is essentially in
It's-
NIMBY.
It's a view obstruction concern and why can't it be built on this part of this property instead of this part that's affecting my view? And it's certainly a prerogative, but I think that there's a lot of rationale for supporting the project, moving forward and not having it be impeded by that, those concerns at this juncture. I mean, a lot of investment has gone into this and a lot of, again, this is specifically workforce and affordable housing for a community that desperately needs people to work in the restaurants. And STRs that these,
The first affordable housing in the
Live on.
area for like 50 miles in any
Yeah.
direction, or 30 miles in any direction, probably more accurate, but first affordable housing in that community. I just remind you, this is Spruce Point, the 60 unit, affordable, and then there's 5 supportive units in there as well.
on deeded property to keep this affordable in perpetuity,
Yes.
which is like a unicorn.
Yeah.
In Manzanita.
That's sort of the dream. If you're gonna get it, this is it.
Yeah,
So this is also a project we have supported the last few years.
Yes.
financially with our funds.
Yeah.
We also talked about how the publication environment has shifted with the new editor of the Headlight Herald covering all the public meetings and publishing immediately, probably with the help of AI, to report on all the local meetings. And that includes things to do with housing. So in a sense, he's taken over the job of reporting on our own meetings, like the Housing Solutions Fund meeting.
we're very grateful for it.
Yes, it plays well. Yeah, and it's really terrific. I appreciate so much that if he's on there, that he's, accounting for, keeping accountable all of the public meetings that are going on. It's really great. But it also is a different slant than our own advocacy for our own work. So we were thinking about how we could supplement the Headlight Herald's reporting by writing letters to the editor and other kinds of things like that, social media and letters to the editor that put our spin on what we want the angle to come out in, because it's very factual reporting, this happened, that happened, that happened. What does it mean? We could add that component. So we'll be talking about that in outreach more.
Y'all might get some assignments for letters to the editor to write at some point.
We talked about the ethical, the ethical background of asserting things as housing commission members or a committee of the housing commission. And that we need to keep that in mind. And as I understand it, we will have a housing commission discussion at some point, as I recall, was going to be on an agenda from the county lawyers.
Yeah, next month.
Which is a segue, but
Yeah,
if
and public.
we talked about it as a subcommittee, that it's a broader, talk about it, an opinion of, as Joe Schmo, it's your business. If you're talking about, I'm a member of the Housing Commission, there are other considerations to make.
And we meet next Thursday, and an action item coming out of that meeting will be to have these talking points for these upcoming.
Thank you.
The planning commission meetings. Be a priority.
And while Parker's taking notes, we're gonna make him give us information on the development committee.
Well, the development committee did not meet last month, again, as my bandwidth has improved and the need has grown. I intend to restart this committee this coming month, and I hope to have identified a chair very soon, but there's a few promising people.
Great. All right, last chance for public comment. There's anybody out on our meeting today that would like to make public comment? This is your final opportunity.
Yeah, this is Will Chappell from the Headlight Herald. I just thought I would chime in since you all mentioned me. I'd be happy to run a column monthly. We kind of go up to 500 words, and I get them from different people, the health department, Tillamook County Wellness, I'm sure the community college does some as well. So if you guys would like to start doing that, it doesn't have to be the same author every month or anything, but I totally understand. I always try to keep it down the middle and unbiased, obviously, so that people can get a feel for that. But I totally understand that you'd like to get a little bit more information out there in terms of advocacy. So I'd be more than happy to do that. Just let me know what you guys decide.
Hey, that's great. What's the deadline on those coming in?
Deadline, we have Thursday at noon for press on the following Tuesday.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Will.
Thanks, Will.
Yeah, you can be assured that we will take advantage of that offer. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, perfect. I'll be looking forward to it.
What is Will's last name? Chapel.
Chapel. Well, great. Well.
And I'm on my
hey,
dad's Zoom. It's confusing. Sorry for that. Teams.
What do we say, Doug?
Yeah.
All right, well, it's 10 minutes early. I think we're gonna call it a day and we will see you next month. The date on May 1st is our next Housing Commission meeting here at the Portsmouth Bay at 9 a.m. So we'll see you then.
Thank you, everyone.